I need to start getting this stuff put back together. That looks okay. Let's get the screws in there. Okay, I won't tighten those up immediately yet, we'll get everything else into position. The chrome plate from the front goes over the top. And we've got to get that seated in that black trim ring. Put that wire out where we can get to it. Better. It's not exactly playing the game. What have I got wrong? Okay, that goes together nicely. That goes together nicely. Why wouldn't it do that the first time round? Well, that bellbird's going for it. There's another one over the other side of the gully too, I can hear that. He'll do a longer song sometimes, he might do one for us if we're lucky. Right, do those screws up tight. Where that wire trapped under there, I have. I don't know. It's not my day today. Or am I retired? As mentioned earlier, I lock these screws here with a touch of lacquer. I've found that stops them causing problems, and they will do that. These screws back out, and typically the symptom is that the shutter is loose. The shutter and lens assembly is loose on the front of the camera. Of course, there's no way to get at those screws short of dismantling the entire camera. We'll just take some lacquer, and this one, as I say, you've got to be a bit less generous with the lacquer, otherwise it'll foul something up. But that'll do nicely. And the front assembly, I've still got my lines lining up here again after I'd managed to get them well out of sync and had to put them back again. Okay, so these components are good to go. That's ready to have the shutter put back on it. But of course, before the shutter goes back on, we will need to have the shutter serviced, and at the moment that's not happened. Well, I have this plate all cleaned. I've polished that with Brasso. It's not wonderful looking, but it's smooth, so that should work well now. Of course, all I've got to do is get it back in the right position. Where do these holes line up? Well, I know that that square hole has to line up with something, so let's try that. That looks promising. That's us. Yeah, those fingerprints are well etched in there. But the main thing is all the high spots, the rough texture is gone now, and that means that the shutter blades will be more likely to move freely across that surface without delay. Right, 3 screws are in position. I can tighten them up. And I'll clean this casing. What was that on the floor? Oh, it's a shame. It's just a trove of parts hitting the carpet. I'll clean this whole case to remove any traces of old grease or dust or dirt, inside and out. It looks pretty good. Once more around there, I think, to remove any paint smears and we're in business. Yeah, that looks good. This graphite grease that's really dried out on that pivot, we'll just have that off. Okay, so the case is good. That's ready to go back. I need to do the mechanism plate next. I'll start with the lens tube. The main reason you want to get rid of all the old grease is that not only will it have dried up and gone sticky with age, it's also likely to have gathered up dust and grit over time, so it's now a grinding paste, not a lubricant. And the graphite grease that remains on this mechanism plate is quite thick. It's like a wax. So that means that the oily base is pretty much gone. Of course, it's most important that the levers all move freely. Generally speaking, they do. They don't require much in the way of lubrication. And the blade actuating ring, well, this was quite black with dried out grease. And as I noted when I took the shutter apart, the blade actuating ring did not move smoothly, or there was quite a noticeable drag to it, which is indicative of thick grease or dried out grease. So that instead of parts snapping to their positions, they just sort of ooze their way across because they're sticky with old grease. Okay, so make sure that detent's back out of the way. Lift my blade actuating ring up and under that spring, drop it into place and hook the detent spring into place behind that lug there, and this is held together by the lens tube, and that only goes on in one direction, one place, because that chewed off lug gives us clearance for that pin there that holds the bracket. There are 3 screws. The 2 short ones go where there's no bracket. The longer screw goes where there is the bracket. Make sure you haven't got the pallets cord underneath this. There's about probably 1/4 millimetre in the length of those screws. In fact, I might measure it while I've got the vernier here and be done with it, and we'll know. Where's that vernier? Otherwise I'll be saying the same lies for years, and we need to know. 3.82 was the long one. Trying to get the length of these screws is not easy. .35, so half a millimetre. Half a millimetre. The short ones are half a millimetre shorter than the long ones. The bracket, I think we can get this bracket on with the 3S. With the Reflex S you cannot. It's just not possible to get everything together if you do that. And my video camera is just telling me that it's tired and it wants the battery changed. Check that the blade actuating ring moves smoothly. Oh, it does. Much better than it did previously, and I haven't lubricated it yet. Okay, I'm going to lubricate this with some graphite powder and change this battery. Right, just checking this is in the blade's open position. That the blade actuating ring is around here counterclockwise against the post. Start putting this stuff in place. Blade number 1 goes here. These blades are in quite good order. I wouldn't say they're perfect in appearance, but they're close enough. This blade's got a steep cutout in the back to clear the shaft at that point. And as you can see, it's much easier to reassemble nice clean shutter blades. Okay, I'll just swing that in slightly. And lift the case into place. We've got 3 screws that hold the case together. And those blades just swung straight back into the open position under the influence of the detent spring. Let's check they'll move back to the closed position. They do. That's nice and smooth in its operation. I can tighten those 3 screws up. That's good, nice smooth action, exactly what we want to see. So I'll take some molybdenum paste and lubricate that detent spring and a couple of points on the blade actuating ring where the main cam picks it up, there and there. And start putting the springs back in place before I lose anything. This little spring needs to go in place. This is most adept at getting away. So hold a toothpick over the centre of that post so it can't disappear. Pick up the tail of the spring lift it into position behind that pin. That lever is now sprung loaded. This lever is now sprung loaded. So that one went well. I'll hold that catch back, swing the blade actuating ring round so that the blades are in the open position, and fit the B lever in place. The B lever has the screw that holds the B lever in place, has this messy spring because it does two jobs. It means that it's hard to get the screw in place easily. Now the spring has to be swung right round and hook in at the back of that B lever. Like that. Just checking that moves smoothly. The other end of the spring is visible here. That bears against the pin on the flash sync setting lever, self-timer setting lever. If I hold the B lever up, I can pull the blades back into the closed position. So that's all working nicely. I'll put the pallet wheel on there. This sector gear that drives the pallet wheel, I'll just put a wipe of molybdenum paste on the little hook on the end of it. Fit that in position. Swing back that sprung loaded lever and drop this right down into position. The spring for that lever needs to go in, hooks over that post. Stretch it out, hook it into that hole on the arm. So that arm, we cock that, drops behind that pin, and as soon as we move the shutter, it releases it. So that's working nicely. Sun's coming around. Cut some of that out. Okay, so the setting lever for the flash sync speeds, there's a detent spring in the body here. I'll just put a touch of molybdenum paste on that, and these little ratchet teeth here likewise. Then this fits in on the body. The pin has to catch behind that spring that was on the B lever screw, like that, and that's sitting nicely in there. This retainer plate goes on, that post comes up through there. You need to press this in so it'll drop past the edge of the plate. And this is held in with 3 screws. That's that part done.